The morning sun hadn't even broken through the horizon when Thomas Brennan heard the noise. It wasn't the usual sound of cattle moving or coyotes howling in the distance. This was different. This was the sound of horses, at least 3 of them, stopping right outside his ranch house. Thomas sat up in bed, his heart pounding. Nobody came out to his place this early. Nobody came out here much at all anymore. He'd made sure of that after his wife died 7 years ago. The loneliness was easier than the pity in people's eyes. He pulled on his boots and grabbed the rifle that always sat by his bed. His hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. At 45 years old, Thomas had seen enough trouble in his life to know when more was coming. When he opened the front door, the riders were already gone. Dust still hung in the air where they'd turned their horses around and galloped off into the purple dawn. But they'd left something behind. Someone. A young woman sat on his porch, her back against the wooden post, her hands tied behind her. Her long black hair fell across her face and her clothes were torn and dirty. She was Apache. Thomas could tell by her features, by the beadwork on what was left of her dress. His stomach dropped. "No," he whispered. No, he'd heard stories about this. Terrible stories. Indian agents and traders who treated people like property, who sold women like cattle. But hearing about evil and seeing it on your own porch were 2 very different things. The woman's head lifted slowly. Her eyes met his, and Thomas saw something that would haunt him forever. Not just fear, though that was there. Not just exhaustion, though she looked like she might collapse any second. What he saw was a kind of defiant dignity, even in chains. She was daring him to be just another monster. Thomas set his rifle down carefully and held up both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, knowing she probably couldn't understand. "I'm going to help you." He moved slowly toward her, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. When he got close enough, he could see the rope burns on her wrists. The bindings were so tight that her hands had started to swell. His jaw clenched with anger, not at her, at whatever kind of men could do this. Thomas pulled out his pocket knife and cut the ropes. The woman gasped as the circulation returned to her hands. She pulled them forward, rubbing her wrists, watching him with those dark, suspicious eyes. "Can you stand?" Thomas asked. He made a gesture, pointing at her, then at the ground, trying to mime standing up. She didn't move. Just stared at him. Thomas backed away and pushed open his front door, gesturing inside. "Water, food. You need help." Still nothing. He disappeared into the house and came back with a cup of water and some bread. He set them on the porch boards and backed away again, giving her space. The woman looked at the food, then at him, then at the food again. Finally, she reached forward and grabbed the water, drinking it so fast that some spilled down her chin. The bread disappeared just as quickly. Thomas sat down on the porch steps, a careful distance away. The sun was rising now, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and pink. It would have been beautiful if the morning hadn't started with such ugliness. "My name is Thomas," he said, pointing at himself. "Thomas." The woman said nothing. They sat in silence for a long time. Thomas tried to think. Whoever had left her here clearly expected him to just accept this situation. Maybe they thought a lonely widower would be grateful for female company, no matter how it arrived. Maybe they thought he was desperate enough to overlook the fact that this was kidnapping, slavery, a crime against everything decent. They were wrong. But sending her away wasn't an option either. Those men might be waiting down the road. Or worse men. A young Apache woman alone in this territory wouldn't last a day. "We need to figure this out," Thomas said, more to himself than to her. "Need to find out where you came from. Get you back home." At the word home, the woman's face changed. Just for a second, her careful mask slipped and Thomas saw pure grief flash across her features. She spoke then, just one word in Spanish. "Muertos." Dead. Thomas felt his chest tighten. He knew enough Spanish from his years in New Mexico. She was saying her people were dead. "Your family?" he asked quietly. She looked away, her jaw set hard. But he saw her blink rapidly, fighting back tears. Thomas wanted to say something comforting, but what comfort was there? This woman had lost everything. Been taken from whatever life she'd had. Been tied up and delivered like a package to a stranger's porch. The sun was fully up now. In a few hours, people might start coming by. His ranch wasn't completely isolated. The sheriff sometimes rode out this way. The neighbors, though they rarely visited, might see smoke from his chimney and get curious about any changes. He couldn't let anyone see her like this. Not because he was ashamed, but because he knew how quickly rumors would spread, how quickly a bad situation could get worse. Come inside, Thomas said, standing up. Please, it's safer. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she got to her feet. She swayed a bit, unsteady. Thomas reached out to help her, but she flinched away from his touch. He nodded and backed off, letting her find her own balance. She followed him into the house, keeping distance between them, her eyes darting around like she was memorizing escape routes. Thomas's home was simple. One main room with a kitchen, a fireplace, and a table. Two smaller rooms off to the side, his bedroom and what used to be a nursery that he'd never had the heart to clear out. You can have my room, Thomas said, pointing. I'll sleep out here. She didn't respond, just stood in the middle of the main room looking lost. Thomas moved to the kitchen and started making coffee. His mind was racing. He needed to contact the sheriff, but carefully. He needed to find out where this woman came from, who had taken her, who had left her here. Most importantly, he needed to figure out how to help her without making everything worse. Behind him, he heard a small sound. He turned and saw the woman had sunk into a chair at his table. Her head was in her hands and her shoulders were shaking silently. Thomas set down the coffee pot. For the first time in 7 years, someone else was crying in his house. He'd forgotten what that sounded like. Forgotten what it felt like to want to comfort another human being. It's going to be okay, he said softly, knowing it might be a lie. I promise you I'm going to figure this out. You're safe here. The woman didn't look up, but her shaking slowed a little. Thomas turned back to his coffee, giving her privacy for her tears. Outside, the New Mexico day was beginning like any other. But inside this small ranch house, two strangers were about to begin a journey neither of them could possibly imagine. A journey that would start with broken ropes on a porch and end up changing everything they thought they knew about home, family, and love. 3 days had passed and the woman still hadn't told Thomas her name. She moved through his house like a ghost, silent and watchful. She wouldn't eat unless he left the room. She wouldn't sleep unless she heard him settle down in the main room, far away from her. Thomas had never felt so helpless in his life. He'd tried everything he could think of. He'd drawn pictures in the dirt outside, trying to ask questions. He'd pointed at things and said their English names, hoping she'd respond with Apache words. He'd even tried singing, thinking maybe music was a universal language. Nothing worked. On the morning of the 4th day, Thomas was making breakfast when she appeared in the doorway. Usually she stayed in the bedroom until he called out that food was ready. But today she'd come out on her own. She was wearing one of his old shirts over her torn dress. It was far too big for her, hanging past her knees. Her hair was braided now, neat and tight. She looked stronger than she had that first morning, but her eyes were still guarded. Buenos dias, Thomas tried in Spanish. Good morning. The woman's eyebrows lifted slightly. Buenos dias, she repeated quietly. Thomas nearly dropped the pan he was holding. It was the first time she'd spoken since that one word on the porch. You speak Spanish? He asked in that language, his words rusty but functional. Un poco, she replied. A little. Thomas felt like shouting with relief. Spanish wasn't perfect, but it was something. It was a bridge. What's your name? He asked carefully in Spanish. She hesitated for a long moment. Ayana. Ayana, Thomas repeated, trying to get the pronunciation right. That's beautiful. I'm Thomas. Tomas, she said, giving it the Spanish pronunciation. He smiled. Yes, Tomas works too. Ayana moved slowly into the room and sat at the table, the same chair she'd sat in that first morning. Thomas served her eggs and bread, then sat across from her with his own plate. They ate in silence, but it felt different now. Less tense. More like two people sharing a meal than a captor and captive. When breakfast was done, Thomas cleared his throat. Ayana, I need to understand what happened to you. Who brought you here? Where did you come from? Her face closed off immediately. She looked down at her empty plate. I want to help, Thomas continued gently. But I can't help if I don't know what's going on. Why? Ayana asked suddenly, looking up at him. Why you help me? Her Spanish was broken but clear enough. Thomas thought about his answer carefully. Because it's the right thing to do, he said. Because what they did to you was wrong. Very wrong. Other men not think so, she replied bitterly. Other men think Apache woman like animal, like horse to trade. Thomas felt anger rise in his chest again. I'm not other men. Ayana studied him for a long moment. Then she started talking, her words slow and mixed with Apache phrases when she couldn't find the Spanish. She told him about the raid, how soldiers had come to her camp at dawn, much like the riders had come to his porch, how people had scattered and run, how she'd seen her father fall, her mother dragged away, how she'd been caught by traitors who sold Apache prisoners to anyone who would pay. The man with the papers, she said, struggling with the words. He work for the government. He take Apache people and give them away. For favors. For money. For whiskey. An Indian agent, Thomas said grimly. He'd heard rumors about corrupt agents before. Now he was seeing the evidence. Ayana nodded. He say you owe him money? He say I am... payment. She spat the last word like it tasted bitter. Thomas stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. I don't owe that man anything. I've never even met an Indian agent. He lie? Ayana asked. He lie, Thomas confirmed. This whole thing is a lie. But even as he said it, Thomas realized the terrible truth. It didn't matter if it was a lie. Somewhere there was probably paperwork with his name on it. Probably documents saying he'd requested an Apache woman as a housekeeper or wife or whatever disgusting term they'd used. He'd been set up. And Ayana was caught in the middle. I'm going to town, Thomas said suddenly. I'm going to talk to the sheriff. We're going to fix this. Fear flashed across Ayana's face. No, sheriff. The sheriff's a good man. He'll help. No, Ayana said more firmly, standing up. Sheriff is white man. Government man. He not help Apache. But you can't just stay here like this, Thomas protested. People will talk. They'll assume things. And we need to find your people, get you somewhere safe. Ayana laughed, but it was a hollow sound. My people dead. My tribe scattered. Safe place not exist for Apache now. The truth of her words hung heavy in the air. Thomas knew she was right. The Apache had been pushed off their lands, forced onto reservations, hunted like criminals. Even if he could find some of her people, what kind of life would she have? Let me at least try, Thomas said. Let me talk to the sheriff. Find out what our options are. Ayana crossed her arms. And if sheriff say I belong to you? If papers say I am yours? Then the papers are wrong. Papers always say Apache are wrong, Ayana said quietly. Papers say we not own our own land. Papers say we must leave or die. Papers lie, but white men believe papers more than truth. Thomas couldn't argue with that. He'd seen it himself. The way laws were twisted to justify taking everything from native people. He sat back down, suddenly exhausted. So what do we do? Ayana was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. I stay here for now. Winter coming soon. I have nowhere else. You're not a prisoner here, Thomas said firmly. You understand that? You can leave whenever you want. Leave to go where? Ayana asked simply. Thomas had no answer. That afternoon, Thomas went into town anyway, leaving Ayana at the ranch. She'd made him promise not to mention her to anyone, but he needed supplies and information. The general store was busy as always. Thomas grabbed flour, coffee, and some fabric he thought Ayana might be able to use to make new clothes. As he was paying, Sheriff Harrison walked in. Thomas Brennan, the sheriff said with a nod. Don't see you in town much these days. Don't have much reason to come, Thomas replied. The sheriff looked at Thomas's purchases. That's a lot of supplies for one man. You expecting company? Thomas felt his stomach tighten. Just stocking up for winter. The sheriff said, not sounding convinced. You heard about that Indian agent causing trouble? Fellow named Clayton, been moving Apache prisoners around, claiming he's relocating them to reservations. But between you and me, I think he's running some kind of scheme. Thomas's hands tightened on his purchases. What kind of scheme? Selling people, most likely. Placing them with ranchers and farmers as unpaid labor. Calling it charity work, but pocketing government money. The sheriff shook his head in disgust. I've been trying to build a case against him, but these folks disappear before I can talk to them. Can't prosecute without witnesses. If someone came forward, Thomas said carefully, would you protect them? The sheriff looked at him sharply. You know something, Thomas. Thomas hesitated. Ayana's voice echoed in his head. Sheriff is white man, government man. He not help Apache. But the sheriff was also describing Ayana's situation exactly. Maybe this was the help they needed. Just asking, Thomas said finally. Hypothetically, the sheriff studied him for a long moment. Hypothetically, I'd protect any witness who could help me put Clayton away. But they'd have to trust me first. And I know trust is hard to come by these days, especially for native folks. Thomas nodded slowly and left the store, his mind spinning. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe the law could actually help, if he could just get Ayanna to believe it. When he got back to the ranch, Ayanna was sitting on the porch. She'd been watching the road, and the relief on her face when she saw him was obvious. "I thought maybe you not come back," she admitted. "I'll always come back," Thomas said. "This is my home. And right now, it's yours too." That night they sat by the fireplace, the silence between them more comfortable than before. Thomas tried to teach Ayanna English words for things around the house. She corrected his Spanish pronunciation and laughed when he got it wrong, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. It was the first time Thomas had heard her laugh. It was also the first time in 7 years he'd laughed with another person. As the fire burned low and they prepared for sleep, Ayanna paused in the doorway to the bedroom. "Tomas," she said softly, "thank you for not being other men." Thomas felt his throat tighten. "You don't have to thank me for basic decency, Ayanna." She smiled sadly. "In this world, yes, I do." She closed the door and Thomas laid down on his bedroll by the fire. Outside, the wind howled across the empty plains. Inside, for the first time in years, the house didn't feel quite so lonely. But Thomas knew this situation couldn't last forever. Eventually, someone would find out about Ayanna. Eventually, there would be questions, accusations, demands. He just hoped that when that day came, he'd have found a way to keep her safe. Because somewhere in the last 4 days, keeping Ayanna safe had become the most important thing in his world. 2 weeks had passed, and life on the ranch had found a strange rhythm. Ayanna no longer hid in the bedroom all day. She'd started helping with small tasks, moving through the ranch with a quiet efficiency that amazed Thomas. She knew things he'd never learned: which plants could heal wounds, how to track animals by the smallest signs, how to predict weather by watching the sky and feeling the wind. She'd been raised on this land in ways Thomas never had, and despite everything she'd lost, that knowledge remained. This morning, Thomas was struggling to fix a section of fence when Ayanna appeared beside him. She watched him fight with the wire for a moment, then shook her head and held out her hand. Thomas gave her the wire, curious. She wrapped it differently than he had, using a technique he'd never seen before. The fence held perfectly. "Where did you learn that?"
"He asked my father," she said simply.
Her voice was less guarded now when she spoke. "He learned from Mexican rancher, before the soldiers come." It was the first time she'd mentioned her father without her face closing off completely. Thomas took that as a good sign. "He taught you well," Thomas said. Ayanna nodded. "He say a woman must know everything a man knows. World is dangerous, must be strong." They worked together in comfortable silence after that. Around midday, they heard the sound of horses approaching. Thomas tensed immediately. Ayanna's hand moved to the knife she now kept at her belt, an old one Thomas had given her. 2 riders came into view. Thomas recognized them. His neighbors, the Patterson brothers. They owned the ranch 5 miles east. "Stay behind me," Thomas murmured to Ayanna. "Let me handle this." The Patterson brothers rode up and stopped a few yards away. The older one, Robert, tipped his hat, but his eyes were fixed on Ayanna. "Thomas," Robert said, "been hearing some interesting rumors." "That so?" Thomas replied evenly. "Word is you've got yourself an Indian woman staying here," the younger brother, Daniel, said. His tone wasn't friendly. "That true?" Thomas felt his jaw tighten. "Her name is Ayanna, and yes, she's staying here temporarily." "Temporarily," Robert repeated like he didn't believe it. "That's not what we heard. We heard that Agent Clayton placed her here permanent-like." "Clayton is a criminal," Thomas said flatly. Whatever he told people, it was a lie. Daniel leaned forward in his saddle. "So you're saying you didn't request an Apache housekeeper?" "I'm saying I didn't request anything. Ayanna was brought here against her will and against mine." "Funny how you haven't sent her away then," Daniel said with a smirk. "Where exactly should I send her?" Thomas shot back. "Her family's dead. Her tribe's been scattered. Should I just throw her out on the road to die?" The brothers exchanged glances. Robert's expression softened slightly, but Daniel's stayed hard. "Look, Thomas," Robert said, "we're not trying to cause trouble, but you gotta understand how this looks. A white man living alone with an Indian woman, no wedding, no proper arrangement. People are talking. Let them talk," Thomas said. "It ain't that simple," Daniel cut in. "You're making all of us look bad. Making it seem like we're okay with this kind of Situation? What situation? Ayanna spoke up suddenly. Her English was getting better every day. Situation where a man shows kindness? Where someone treats Apache like human? Daniel's face flushed. No one asked you to speak, girl. Thomas took a step forward, his hand moving toward his gun. Watch your mouth, Daniel. Or what? Daniel challenged. You're gonna shoot me over some Apache woman? I'll shoot you for being disrespectful on my land, Thomas said coldly. Now I think you boys should leave. Robert held up his hands. We're going. But Thomas, think about what people are saying. Think about your reputation. If you're keeping her, you need to make it proper. Marriage or work papers or something official. Otherwise, folks are going to assume the worst. They rode off, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Thomas stood there, fists clenched, watching them disappear. Marriage? Ayanna said quietly behind him. They say you should marry me? Thomas turned to look at her. They don't understand. They think every problem can be solved with papers and ceremonies. Maybe they are right, Ayanna said thoughtfully. What? She walked past him, heading back toward the house. You say papers have power. Marriage paper would give me protection under white man's law, yes? Thomas followed her. Ayanna, you can't be serious. Marriage isn't just a piece of paper. It's a commitment, a promise. I know what marriage is, she said, turning to face him. In my tribe, marriage was partnership. Two people working together to survive is not so different. It's completely different, Thomas protested. You barely know me. I barely know you. And I won't have you thinking you need to marry me out of necessity. Ayanna tilted her head, studying him. You married before, yes? Your wife? The question caught Thomas off guard. He hadn't talked about his wife in years. Yes, you love her? Very much. She died. You are sad. 7 years you live alone because you are sad. It wasn't a question. Thomas felt exposed. What's your point? My point is you marry for love first time. It bring you pain when she die. Maybe this time marry for different reason. Marry for partnership, for protection, for survival. Ayanna shrugged. Maybe is better. No pain when there is no big love. Thomas sat down heavily on the porch steps. That's a pretty sad way to look at it. Is realistic way, Ayanna countered, sitting beside him. I am Apache woman in white man's world. You are lonely man with too much space in your house. We both survive better together than alone. This is truth, she wasn't wrong. Thomas hated that she wasn't wrong. I won't force you into anything, he said finally. If you want to stay here as my friend, my partner in running this ranch, that's enough for me. We don't need papers. But papers would stop the talk, Ayanna pointed out. Would stop men like Daniel from calling me that Apache woman like his insult. Would give me name that white people respect. You already have a name, Thomas said firmly. Ayanna, it's a beautiful name and anyone who doesn't respect it can answer to me. She smiled slightly. You are good man, Tomas. But good men cannot always protect from bad world. Over the next few days, the visits from neighbors increased. Some came out of genuine concern. Others came to judge. The town's preacher even made the long ride out, speaking about morality and proper Christian behavior. Thomas sent them all away with firm words and a clear message. Ayanna was under his protection, and that was the end of the discussion. But Ayanna noticed things Thomas tried to hide. The way the general store owner hesitated before serving him now. The way people stopped talking when he walked into the saloon. The way children pointed at him on the street. One evening, Ayanna found Thomas sitting alone in the barn, his head in his hands. They are hurting you, she said softly, because of me. I don't care what they think, Thomas said, not looking up. You are a bad liar. She sat down beside him on the hay bale. I bring you shame. I bring you trouble. Maybe I should go. Thomas's head snapped up. Go where? We've been over this. Maybe I find Apache reservation. Maybe I survive on my own. Maybe you'd die trying, Thomas said harshly. Then he sighed and softened his tone. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at a world that makes us feel like we're doing something wrong when we're not. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of horses moving in their stalls filling the space between them. Tomas, Ayanna said eventually, I think about the marriage idea. Not because I'm scared, not because I need protection only, but because I think maybe we are good partners. Maybe we build something good here, you and me. Thomas looked at her in surprise. You've thought about it? Every day I think about it, she admitted. I watch you. You are kind but not weak. You are lonely but not desperate. You treat me like person, not like property. These are rare things. Ayanna, I do not love you, she said bluntly. We must be honest. I do not love you like woman loves husband. My heart is still too broken from losing my family. I know, Thomas said quietly. I don't love you that way either. I'm still... He trailed off. Still loving your dead wife, Ayanna finished gently. I understand. But maybe two broken people can build something that works. Not perfect. Not like stories. But real, true good. Thomas thought about his wife. About the love they'd shared. About the joy and the pain of it. Then he thought about the last 7 years. About the emptiness. About nights spent alone. Days without purpose beyond basic survival. Ayanna was offering something different. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new. A partnership built on respect and mutual need. Maybe it wasn't romantic, but maybe it was exactly what they both needed. If we did this, Thomas said slowly, it would be on your terms. You'd have say in everything. This would be a real partnership, not me making decisions for you. I would want my own space, Ayanna said immediately. Bedroom stays mine. We live like friends who share house. Agreed. And I keep learning English. Keep learning about white world. But you also learn about my world, my people, my ways. I'd like that, Thomas said honestly. And if someday I want to leave, you let me go. No anger, no ownership. Thomas felt a pang in his chest at that, but he nodded. If you want to leave, I'll help you go wherever you want. Ayanna extended her hand. Then we have deal. Partnership marriage. For survival and respect. Thomas took her hand and shook it. Her grip was firm and strong. Partnership, Mari. The decision to look for Ayanna's people came on a clear morning 3 weeks after she'd arrived. Thomas had been thinking about it for days but hadn't known how to bring it up. Finally, over breakfast, he just asked, what if there are survivors from your tribe? People who made it to the settlements? Ayanna's hand froze halfway to her mouth. She set down her fork carefully. Why you ask this now? Because before we do anything permanent, you deserve to know if you have family out there. People who are looking for you. She was quiet for a long moment. And if I find family? If I find my people? Then you'd have a choice, Thomas said simply. Stay here with me or go be with them. But at least it would be your choice, not something forced on you. Ayanna stared at her plate. Thomas could see the conflict on her face. Hope warring with fear, the desire to find her people battling the terror of what she might discover. There is settlement, she said finally. 3 days' ride north. Apache families go there sometimes. Maybe someone knows something about my tribe. Then that's where we'll go, Thomas decided. We'll leave tomorrow. They prepared for the journey carefully. Thomas packed supplies while Ayanna gathered herbs and plants she said they might need. That evening, she taught him some basic Apache words. Greetings, respectful phrases. Ways to show he meant no harm. Your accent is terrible, she said, but she was smiling. Well, your English accent isn't perfect either, Thomas teased back. My English accent is beautiful, Ayanna said with mock pride. You are just jealous. It was the first time they'd joked like this. The first time the air between them felt light instead of heavy with everything unsaid. They left at dawn. The ride north took them through country Thomas knew, but Ayanna remembered in ways he never could. She'd point to a distant rock formation and tell him the Apache name for it. She'd explain how her people had used this land, lived on it, been part of it. White men see land as something to own, she said as they rode. My people see land as something we belong to. Is different. I'm starting to understand that, Thomas admitted. You see things I've never noticed, even though I've lived here for years. On the second day, dark clouds rolled in from the west. By afternoon, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Storm coming, Ayanna said, scanning the horizon. Big one, Thomas looked around. They were in open country, miles from town, miles from his ranch. There's an old line shack about an hour east. We can shelter there. They urged their horses faster, racing against the storm. The first drops of rain started falling as they spotted the small wooden structure. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof used by cattlemen during roundups. But right now it looked like a palace. They got the horses under a small overhang just as the sky opened up. Rain came down in sheets so thick Thomas could barely see 10 feet ahead. Thunder cracked overhead, making the horses nervous. Inside the shack they were dry but cold. Thomas got a fire going in the old stove while Ayanna spread out their blankets. The space was tiny, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Barely room for both of them. Could be here a while, Thomas said, looking out at the storm. These desert rains can last hours. Ayana nodded, sitting near the fire to warm her hands. Her hair was damp from the rain, curling slightly around her face. Thomas found himself staring and quickly looked away. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of stopping. They ate some of the dried meat and bread they'd packed. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped. Only 2 blankets, Thomas noted. You should take both. I'll be fine by the fire. Fire will die in night, Ayana pointed out practically. We share blankets. Stay warmer. I don't think that's appropriate, Thomas said, though even as he said it, he could feel how cold the shack was getting. Ayana rolled her eyes. You white people and you're appropriate. We survive or we freeze because of appropriate. I choose survive. She was right, of course. Thomas nodded reluctantly. They arranged the blankets and lay down near the fire, a careful distance between them. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain on the roof was almost deafening. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning flashed through the cracks in the wooden walls. Tomas, Ayana said into the darkness. Can I ask about your wife? Thomas stiffened. What do you want to know? What was she like? No one had asked him that in years. People avoided mentioning his wife, like her memory might break him. But Ayana's question felt different. Not pitying, just curious. She was strong, Thomas said slowly. Not in body, but in spirit. She had opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to share them. Made me laugh even when I didn't want to. You miss her. Every day. The words came easier than he expected. She died giving birth. The baby too, a son. He lived for about an hour. He heard Ayana's breath catch. I am sorry. It's been 7 years. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like someone else's life. Thomas stared at the dark ceiling. I buried them under a cottonwood tree on my property. Sometimes I still talk to them. This is good, Ayana said softly. Dead should be remembered. Should be spoken to. In my tribe, we believe the dead stay close if we keep them in our hearts. What were your people like? Thomas asked. Your family? Ayana was quiet for so long that Thomas thought she might not answer. Then she started talking, her voice thick with emotion. My father was a hunter, best in our band. He could track anything. He'd teach me everything he knew. My mother made beautiful baskets. She would weave stories into the patterns. Each basket told something about our people, our history. Do you remember the stories? Some, not all. I was young when I stopped watching her work. I thought I had time to learn everything later. Her voice broke slightly. There is no later now. Thomas felt the urge to reach out to comfort her, but he stayed still. Tell me what you remember. Tell me the stories, and so she did. In the darkness of that tiny shack, with rain pounding outside and the fire crackling between them, Ayana told stories. Stories her mother had woven. Stories her father had shared. Stories of how the world was made, how the Apache came to be, why the stars were arranged the way they were. Thomas listened, fascinated. This was a whole world he'd never known existed, a world that had been here long before he arrived, and that people were trying desperately to erase. Your people were poets, Thomas said when she paused. These stories are beautiful. Were, Ayana corrected bitterly. You say were. Maybe all gone now. Maybe I am last one who remembers. Then you have to keep remembering, Thomas said fiercely. You have to keep the stories alive. Who will I tell them to? Ayana asked. White children who will grow up to hate Apache? White men who think my people are savages? You'll tell them to me, Thomas said. And I'll listen. And I'll remember too. You won't be the only one carrying them. He heard her shift in the darkness. When she spoke again, her voice was closer. You mean this? You want to learn? I mean it. Every word. The fire had burned low. The temperature had dropped even more. Almost without thinking, they moved closer together under the blankets. Not romantic. Just 2 people sharing warmth in a cold night. Tomas, Ayana whispered. I think maybe you are the best white man I have met. Thomas felt his chest tighten. I think you might be the bravest person I've ever met. Apache or otherwise. They lay there in comfortable silence after that. The storm raged outside, but inside the shack something had shifted. The walls between them were coming down. Not the physical walls, those stayed firmly in place. But the emotional ones, the barriers built from pain and loss and cultural differences, those were starting to crumble. Thomas found himself thinking about his wife less and about the woman beside him more. Not in a romantic way, he told himself, just in a way that acknowledged how much his life had changed in a few short weeks, how much less empty the world felt with Ayanna in it. Beside him, Ayanna was thinking similar thoughts. This rancher who'd been forced into her life had become something unexpected. Not a captor, not a master, maybe not quite a friend yet, but something. Someone who listened, someone who cared about her stories, her people, her pain. Maybe, she thought, this partnership idea wasn't so crazy after all. The storm finally broke around midnight. They both dozed off, exhausted from the day's ride and the emotional weight of their conversations. When Thomas woke near dawn, he realized Ayanna had curled close to him in her sleep, seeking warmth. He stayed very still, not wanting to wake her and make things awkward. In sleep, her face looked younger, peaceful. The hard, guarded expression she usually wore was gone. She was beautiful, Thomas realized with a start. He'd noticed she was pretty before in an abstract way, but seeing her like this, vulnerable and trusting enough to sleep beside him, something shifted in his chest. Immediately, he felt guilty. His wife had been dead for 7 years, but this felt like betrayal. He shouldn't be noticing Ayanna this way, especially when they'd agreed their arrangement would be practical, not romantic. Ayanna stirred and opened her eyes. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Neither moved away. Storm passed, Thomas said quietly. Yes, Ayanna agreed. We should go. But neither of them moved for another moment. Something hung in the air between them. Not quite tension. Not quite comfort. Something new and undefined. Finally, Ayanna pulled back and started rolling up the blankets. They packed quickly and efficiently. They got back to the ranch 3 days after leaving the settlement. 3 days that had changed everything and nothing. Ayanna was quieter now, more settled into a sad kind of acceptance. Thomas found himself watching her more, worrying about her in ways that went beyond simple concern. The morning after they returned, Thomas made his decision. He found Ayanna in the garden she'd started behind the house, planting herbs she'd gathered from their journey. I'm riding into town today, he announced, going to talk to the preacher about a wedding. Ayanna looked up at him, dirt on her hands, surprise on her face. You sure? After the trip, after everything we learned? I'm sure, Thomas said firmly. You were right before. A marriage gives you legal protection, makes you a citizen's wife. No one can question your right to be here. But we agree this is partnership only, Ayanna said carefully. Nothing more. Nothing more, Thomas confirmed. But partnership needs to be legal if we're going to make this work. Is that still what you want? Ayanna stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. She looked at Thomas for a long moment. I want to be clear about terms, about what this marriage means. Let's hear them. First, I keep my bedroom. We do not share a bed. Agreed. Second, I am partner in ranch, not servant. We make decisions together. Already planned on that. Third, if I ever want to leave, you let me go. No questions. No anger. Thomas felt that familiar pang again, but he nodded. If you want to leave, I'll help you get wherever you need to go. And fourth, Ayanna said, her voice softer now, we are honest with each other, always, about everything. Even when truth is hard. Especially when the truth is hard, Thomas agreed. Do you have any demands for me? Anything I should promise? Ayanna thought for a moment. Promise you will never treat me like property. Never speak for me when I can speak for myself. Never make me feel like I owe you for helping me. I promise, Thomas said solemnly. You don't owe me anything, Ayanna. This is a partnership of equals. She extended her hand. They shook on it like business partners making a deal, which Thomas supposed is exactly what they were. The next day, Thomas rode into town. The preacher, a man named Reverend Miller, listened to his request with barely concealed disapproval. You want to marry the Apache woman, Miller said flatly. The one you've had living with you for weeks now. Her name is Ayanna, Thomas corrected. And yes, I want to marry her properly, legally. Thomas, I've known you for 10 years, since before your wife passed. Are you certain about this? The Reverend's voice softened slightly. This isn't just about convenience or reputation, is it? Marriage is sacred. I know what marriage is, Reverend. And yes, this is partly about giving Ayanna legal protection, but it's also about building a life together, a real partnership. Thomas met the preacher's eyes steadily. She's a good person. Smart, strong, kind. She deserves respect, not judgment. Miller sighed. You know half the town will refuse to come. Then they don't have to come. I need you and 2 witnesses. That's all the law requires. The Reverend studied Thomas for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Saturday noon, I'll do it. But Thomas, understand that this won't be easy for either of you. The world isn't kind to couples like you. The world hasn't been particularly kind anyway, Thomas replied. At least this way we face it together. When Thomas got back to the ranch and told Ayanna the news, her reaction surprised him. She looked terrified. Saturday? That is 4 days away. Is that too soon? We can wait if you need more time. No, is not that. Ayanna paced the room. I just realize I do not know what white wedding is like. What I should wear. How I should act. What if I do something wrong? What if I shame you? Thomas caught her hand as she passed. Hey, look at me. You could never shame me. And we'll keep it simple. Just the preacher and maybe Sheriff Harrison as a witness. What do white brides wear? Usually a nice dress. But Ayanna, you don't have to follow all the traditions. This is our wedding. We make our own rules. Ayanna bit her lip. I have idea. But you might think is strange. Try me. I want to wear Apache dress. My mother's style. I remember how she made them. I have been gathering materials, thinking maybe someday I make one to remember her. Ayanna looked at him nervously. But if this is wrong for white wedding? It's perfect, Thomas interrupted. You should honor your mother. Your people. That's part of who you are. Relief flooded Ayanna's face. You are sure? I'm sure. In fact, I think it's important. This marriage is about joining 2 different worlds. We should embrace that, not hide it. The next few days were busy. Ayanna worked on her dress, her fingers remembering patterns her mother had taught her years ago. Thomas cleaned the house, fixed things that had been broken for months, and tried not to think too hard about what he was doing. He wasn't betraying his first wife's memory. He kept telling himself that. This was different. This was practical. A business arrangement with genuine respect at its foundation. But late at night, lying on his bedroll by the fire, Thomas wondered if he was lying to himself. Because when he thought about Ayanna leaving, about her not being in his house anymore, his chest felt tight. When he heard her laugh, which was still rare but getting more common, something in him lightened. That wasn't just partnership. That was something more, something he wasn't ready to name. The night before the wedding, Thomas found Ayanna sitting outside looking at the stars. Nervous? He asked, sitting beside her. Terrified, she admitted. Not of you. Of tomorrow. Of what it means. Once we do this, everything changes. It doesn't have to, Thomas said. We can still be exactly what we are now, just with legal protection. But as a lie, Ayanna said quietly. We tell ourselves this is just partnership, just practical arrangement. But Tomas, we are already more than that. We are friends now. We care about each other. We worry when the other is sad. Is not just business anymore. Thomas felt his heart pound. What are you saying? I am saying we should be honest. Like we promised. Ayanna turned to look at him. I am saying I do not love you like great romance in white people's stories. But I care for you. I respect you. I trust you. Maybe that is its own kind of love. Small love. Quiet love. But real. Thomas took a breath. I care about you too. More than I expected to. You've made my house feel like a home again. Made me feel like a person again instead of just a ghost moving through rooms. So tomorrow we marry for protection, yes. But also for this. For the caring. For the friendship. For the small, quiet love. Ayanna smiled slightly. It's okay to admit this, yes? Yes, Thomas said, feeling something release in his chest. It's okay. They sat together until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cold. Then they went inside to their separate spaces, but somehow feeling closer than they ever had. Saturday came too quickly. Thomas put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to his first wedding and then to his wife's funeral. It felt strange wearing it again, but it also felt right, like closing one chapter and opening another. When Ayanna emerged from the bedroom, Thomas forgot to breathe. She'd made a traditional Apache dress, decorated with beadwork and patterns he didn't understand but found beautiful. Her hair was braided with leather and feathers woven through it. She looked like she belonged to this land in ways he never could. You look beautiful, Thomas said honestly. Ayanna blushed. You look very handsome. Very serious. Like proper white rancher. They rode into town together, both silent, both thinking their own thoughts. At the church, Sheriff Harrison was waiting along with his wife. Thomas had asked them to be witnesses, and they'd agreed despite the town's gossip. Inside the small church, Reverend Miller stood ready. The building was empty except for the 5 of them. No decorations, no music. No crowd of well-wishers. Just a simple ceremony for a complicated situation. Miller went through the traditional words. Thomas repeated them, his voice steady. When it was Ayana's turn, she spoke in halting English, but her voice was clear and strong. The Reverend asked if anyone objected. Silence. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. He paused, looking between them. You may kiss the bride. Thomas and Ayana looked at each other. They hadn't discussed this part. In the moment, Thomas leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently, respectfully. Ayana's hand came up to touch his arm. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't the kiss of great romance. But it was honest. Real. Full of the quiet care they'd promised each other. Sheriff Harrison clapped Thomas on the shoulder. Congratulations. You've got yourself a fine woman there, Thomas. Treat her right. I intend to, Thomas said. His wife smiled warmly at Ayana. Welcome to the family of brave women who married stubborn men. If you ever need anything, you come find me. We ladies have to stick together. Ayana looked surprised but pleased by the kindness. Thank you. I remember this. They signed the papers, made it official, legal, real. When they walked out of the church, Ayana was no longer just an Apache woman with no rights. She was Mrs. Thomas Brennan, a citizen's wife protected under the law. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. When they arrived, Thomas helped Ayana down from her horse. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to do next. So, Thomas said, we're married now. Yes, Ayana agreed. We are married. Nothing has to change, Thomas said quickly. You still have your room. We still have our agreement. They got back to the ranch 3 days after leaving the settlement. 3 days that had changed everything and nothing. Ayana was quieter now, more settled into a sad kind of acceptance. Thomas found himself watching her more, worrying about her in ways that went beyond simple concern. The morning after they returned, Thomas made his decision. He found Ayana in the garden she'd started behind the house, planting herbs she'd gathered from their journey. I'm riding into town today, he announced, going to talk to the preacher about a wedding. Ayana looked up at him, dirt on her hands, surprise on her face. You sure? After the trip? After everything we learned? I'm sure, Thomas said firmly. You were right before. A marriage gives you legal protection, makes you a citizen's wife. No one can question your right to be here. But we agree this is partnership only, Ayana said carefully. Nothing more. Nothing more, Thomas confirmed. But partnership needs to be legal if we're going to make this work. Is that still what you want? Ayana stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. She looked at Thomas for a long moment. I want to be clear about terms, about what this marriage means. Let's hear them. First, I keep my bedroom. We do not share a bed. Agreed. Second, I am partner in ranch, not servant. We make decisions together, already planned on that. Third, if I ever want to leave, you let me go. No questions, no anger. Thomas felt that familiar pang again, but he nodded. If you want to leave, I'll help you get wherever you need to go. And fourth, Ayana said, her voice softer now. We are honest with each other, always, about everything, even when truth is hard. Especially when the truth is hard. Thomas agreed. Do you have any demands for me? Anything I should promise? Ayana thought for a moment. Promise you will never treat me like property. Never speak for me when I can speak for myself. Never make me feel like I owe you for helping me. I promise, Thomas said solemnly. You don't owe me anything, Ayana. This is a partnership of equals. She extended her hand. They shook on it, like business partners making a deal, which Thomas supposed is exactly what they were. The next day, Thomas rode into town. The preacher, a man named Reverend Miller, listened to his request with barely concealed disapproval. You want to marry the Apache woman? Miller said flatly. The one you've had living with you for weeks now. Her name is Ayanna, Thomas corrected. And yes, I want to marry her. Properly. Legally. Thomas, I've known you for 10 years. Since before your wife passed. Are you certain about this? The Reverend's voice softened slightly. This isn't just about convenience or reputation, is it? Marriage is sacred. I know what marriage is, Reverend. And yes, this is partly about giving Ayanna legal protection, but it's also about building a life together. A real partnership. Thomas met the preacher's eyes steadily. She's a good person, smart, strong, kind. She deserves respect, not judgment. Miller sighed. You know half the town will refuse to come. Then they don't have to come. I need you and 2 witnesses. That's all the law requires. The Reverend studied Thomas for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Saturday, noon. I'll do it. But Thomas, understand that this won't be easy for either of you. The world isn't kind to couples like you. The world hasn't been particularly kind anyway, Thomas replied. At least this way we face it together. When Thomas got back to the ranch and told Ayanna the news, her reaction surprised him. She looked terrified. Saturday? That is 4 days away. Is that too soon? We can wait if you need more time. No, is not that. Ayanna paced the room. I just realize. I do not know what white wedding is like. What I should wear. How I should act. What if I do something wrong? What if I shame you? Thomas caught her hand as she passed. Hey, look at me. You could never shame me. And we'll keep it simple, just the preacher and maybe Sheriff Harrison as a witness. What do white brides wear? Usually a nice dress. But Ayanna, you don't have to follow all the traditions. This is our wedding. We make our own rules. Ayanna bit her lip. I have idea, but you might think is strange. Try me. I want to wear Apache dress, my mother's style. I remember how she made them. I have been gathering materials, thinking maybe someday I make one to remember her. Ayanna looked at him nervously. But if this is wrong for white wedding, it's perfect, Thomas interrupted. You should honor your mother, your people. That's part of who you are. Relief flooded Ayanna's face. You are sure? I'm sure. In fact, I think it's important. This marriage is about joining 2 different worlds. We should embrace that, not hide it. The next few days were busy. Ayanna worked on her dress, her fingers remembering patterns her mother had taught her years ago. Thomas cleaned the house, fixed things that had been broken for months, and tried not to think too hard about what he was doing. He wasn't betraying his first wife's memory. He kept telling himself that. This was different. This was practical. A business arrangement with genuine respect at its foundation. But late at night, lying on his bedroll by the fire, Thomas wondered if he was lying to himself. Because when he thought about Ayanna leaving, about her not being in his house anymore, his chest felt tight. When he heard her laugh, which was still rare but getting more common, something in him lightened. That wasn't just partnership. That was something more. Something he wasn't ready to name. The night before the wedding, Thomas found Ayanna sitting outside looking at the stars. Nervous? He asked, sitting beside her. Terrified, she admitted. Not of you. Of tomorrow. Of what it means. Once we do this, everything changes. It doesn't have to, Thomas said. We can still be exactly what we are now. Just with legal protection. But is a lie, Ayanna said quietly. We tell ourselves this is just partnership, just practical arrangement. But Tomas, we are already more than that. We are friends now. We care about each other. We worry when the other is sad. Is not just business anymore. Thomas felt his heart pound. What are you saying? I am saying we should be honest, like we promised. Ayanna turned to look at him. I am saying I do not love you like great romance in white people's stories. But I care for you. I respect you. I trust you. Maybe that is its own kind of love. Small love. Quiet love. But real. Thomas took a breath. I care about you too. More than I expected to. You've made my house feel like a home again. Made me feel like a person again instead of just a ghost moving through rooms. So tomorrow, we marry for protection. Yes. But also for this. For the caring. For the friendship. For the small, quiet love. Ayana smiled slightly. Is okay to admit this, yes? Yes, Thomas said, feeling something release in his chest. It's okay. They sat together until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cold. Then they went, inside, to their separate spaces but somehow feeling closer than they ever had. Saturday came too quickly. Thomas put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to his first wedding and then to his wife's funeral. It felt strange wearing it again, but it also felt right, like closing one chapter and opening another. When Ayana emerged from the bedroom, Thomas forgot to breathe. She'd made a traditional Apache dress, decorated with beadwork and patterns he didn't understand but found beautiful. Her hair was braided with leather and feathers woven through it. She looked like she belonged to this land in ways he never could. You look beautiful, Thomas said honestly. Ayana blushed. You look very handsome, very serious, like proper white rancher. They rode into town together, both silent, both thinking their own thoughts. At the church, Sheriff Harrison was waiting, along with his wife. Thomas had asked them to be witnesses and they'd agreed despite the town's gossip. Inside the small church, Reverend Miller stood ready. The building was empty except for the 5 of them. No decorations, no music, no crowd of well-wishers. Just a simple ceremony for a complicated situation. Miller went through the traditional words. Thomas repeated them, his voice steady. When it was Ayana's turn, she spoke in halting English, but her voice was clear and strong. The Reverend asked if anyone objected. Silence. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. He paused, looking between them. You may kiss the bride. Thomas and Ayana looked at each other. They hadn't discussed this part. In the moment, Thomas leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently, respectfully. Ayana's hand came up to touch his arm. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't the kiss of great romance. But it was honest, real, full of the quiet care they'd promised each other. Sheriff Harrison clapped Thomas on the shoulder. Congratulations. You've got yourself a fine woman there, Thomas. Treat her right. I intend to, Thomas said. His wife smiled warmly at Ayana. Welcome to the family of brave women who married stubborn men. If you ever need anything, you come find me. We ladies have to stick together. Ayana looked surprised but pleased by the kindness. Thank you, I remember this. They signed the papers, made it official, legal, real. When they walked out of the church, Ayana was no longer just an Apache woman with no rights. She was Mrs. Thomas Brennan, a citizen's wife protected under the law. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. When they arrived, Thomas helped Ayana down from her horse. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to do next. So, Thomas said, we're married now. Winter came to New Mexico with surprising yes, Ayana agreed, we are married. Spring arrived with wildflowers and possibility. Thomas and Ayana's relationship had deepened over the winter months. They still maintained separate bedrooms, but most nights ended with them falling asleep by the fire together, wrapped in each other's arms. They moved through their days with the ease of people who truly knew each other, who'd built something genuine from the ground up. Thomas had never been happier. The house that had been empty for so long now rang with Ayana's laughter. The land that had felt like a prison now felt like home. He'd catch himself smiling for no reason, just because she was near. But happiness, Thomas had learned, was a fragile thing. The Apache man appeared on a warm morning in March. Thomas was in the barn when he heard Ayana's sharp intake of breath from outside. He came out to find her standing frozen, staring at a tall figure on horseback. The man was Apache, probably in his late 20s, lean and strong with traditional markings and clothing. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone born to riding. When he saw Ayana, his face transformed with joy. Ayana, he said in Apache, dismounting quickly, you are alive. I have searched for so long. Ayana's hand went to her mouth. Dakota, is it really you? They spoke rapidly in Apache, words tumbling over each other. Thomas stood watching, understanding nothing except that this man knew Ayanna. Knew her well, from the way they were looking at each other. Finally, Ayanna seemed to remember Thomas was there. She turned to him, her face flushed with emotion. "Tomas, this is Dakota. He was my friend. From before? From my tribe. I thought he was dead." "I am very much alive," Dakota said in accented English, looking at Thomas with sharp, assessing eyes. "And I have found you at last." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "Welcome. Will you come inside? Have something to eat?" Dakota nodded, never taking his eyes off Ayanna. They went into the house and Ayanna prepared food with shaking hands. Thomas sat across from Dakota, trying not to show his growing anxiety. "How did you find her?" Thomas asked. "I have been searching since the raid," Dakota replied, "going to every settlement, every reservation, asking about survivors. Last week someone told me about an Apache woman married to a white rancher." "I knew it had to be Ayanna. You've been searching for a year?" Ayanna asked, setting food in front of him. "Longer. Almost 2 years now." Dakota looked at her with something in his eyes that made Thomas's chest tighten. "I promised your father I would always protect you. I failed when the soldiers came, but I never stopped looking." Ayanna sat down heavily. "My father. You saw him?" "I was with him when he fell," Dakota said gently. "His last words were to tell you to survive, to live, to carry on our people's stories." Tears streamed down Ayanna's face. Thomas wanted to go to her, comfort her, but something held him back. This was a grief he couldn't share, a connection to a past he'd never be part of. Dakota reached across the table and took Ayanna's hand. She let him. Thomas watched the gesture and felt something cold settle in his stomach. They talked for hours, mostly in Apache. Thomas understood nothing except the tone. Grief, memory, shared history, connection. Finally, as the sun began to set, Dakota stood. "I cannot stay tonight. I am camped 2 miles north with others. We are traveling to new lands, trying to find a place where Apache can live as Apache." He looked at Ayanna intently. "This is why I came to find you." "To bring you with us." "With you," Ayanna repeated. "Yes, 15 families, all survivors. We are going to settle in the mountains near Mexico border. Government does not watch there so much. We can practice our ways, speak our language, raise children who know who they are." Dakota glanced at Thomas, then back to Ayanna. "You belong with your people, Ayanna." "Not here." Thomas felt like he'd been punched. He started to speak, but Ayanna cut him off. "Dakota, I am married now. This is my home." "Married," Dakota said the word like it tasted bitter. "You are married to a white man who keeps you like a pet. This is not marriage. This is not life for Apache woman." "You don't know anything about our marriage," Thomas said, anger rising. "I know white men," Dakota shot back. "I know what they do to Apache women. I know you think you own her because you have papers. Nobody owns her," Thomas said firmly. "Ayanna is free to make her own choices. She always has been." Dakota looked skeptical. "Then you would let her leave?" "Just like that?" Thomas met his eyes. "If that's what she wants, yes." "Tomas," Ayanna started, but Dakota interrupted. "You see? Even now he speaks for you, decides for you." Dakota turned back to Ayanna, his voice softening. "Come with us. Rejoin your people. Remember who you are. This white man's world is not your world. I remember who I am," Ayanna said quietly. "Every day, every moment. Do you? Or have you become what they want you to be?" Dakota challenged. "Do you still speak Apache every day? Practice our customs? Honor our ways? Or do you live like a white woman now, pretending that is enough?" His words struck deep. Thomas could see them hit Ayanna like physical blows, because there was truth in them. Over the winter, focused on their growing feelings for each other, some of Ayanna's cultural practices had faded. She spoke more English than Apache now, wore white woman's dresses more often than traditional clothing. "That's not fair," Thomas said. "She does both. She honors her heritage and builds a new life." "Why can't it be both?" "Because white world does not allow both," Dakota said. "Eventually it swallows everything Apache, turns our people into copies of you. This is what I have seen on every reservation, in every settlement. Our culture dies slowly while we pretend to adapt." "Not here," Ayanna said, but her voice wavered. "Here I can be both, can you?" Dakota asked gently. "Or are you just telling yourself this because you are afraid to leave?" Because it is easier to stay than to be truly Apache again? Ayana stood up abruptly. You should go now. Come back tomorrow. I need time to think. Dakota nodded and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned back. Think carefully, old friend. This may be your last chance to come home to your people. We leave in 3 days. He looked at Thomas. I mean no disrespect to you. But she deserves to be with those who share her blood, her history, her soul. When he left, the silence in the house was deafening. Ayana stood at the window watching Dakota ride away. Thomas wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. Finally, Ayana spoke without turning around. He is right about some things. What things? Thomas asked, dreading the answer. I have lost parts of myself. Living here, trying to fit into your world. I speak less Apache. Practice fewer traditions. Sometimes I go whole days without thinking about my mother, my father, my people. She turned to face him, tears on her cheeks. I am forgetting, Thomas. Slowly I am forgetting who I was. Then we'll change that, Thomas said desperately. We'll make sure you practice your traditions. Speak Apache whenever you want. We'll find other Apache families to visit. Whatever you need. But is not the same, Ayana said sadly. Is not the same as being with my people. Living as Apache. Raising children who will know their heritage naturally, not as something we have to work to preserve. Children, Thomas repeated. They'd never discussed children. Had she been thinking about it? Wanting it? Dakota asked good question, Ayana continued. Am I staying because I want to? Or because I am afraid? Because it is comfortable and safe. Do you love me? Thomas asked bluntly. Because I thought, these past months, I thought we were building something real. We are, Ayana said, fresh tears falling. That is what makes this so hard. I do love you, Tomas, but I also love my people, my culture, my identity.
Can I have both?
Or do I have to choose? Thomas crossed to her and took her hands. You don't have to choose. We can make it work. Whatever you need, whatever will make you happy, we'll figure it out. But what if I need to go? Ayana asked, her voice breaking. What if I need to be with Apache people, live Apache life even for a little while? What if staying here means losing myself completely? Thomas felt his world crumbling. Are you saying you want to leave? I am saying I do not know, Ayana cried. I am confused. Dakota shows up and reminds me of everything I lost, everything I gave up, everything I am forgetting. And now I must decide. Do I choose love or identity? Do I choose you or my people? Why does it have to be a choice? Thomas asked desperately. Because the world makes it a choice, Ayana said bitterly. You said it yourself. Your neighbors hate that you married Apache woman. My people think I betrayed them by marrying white man. There is no middle ground. There is no place where I can be both fully Apache and fully your wife. Thomas pulled her into his arms and she sobbed against his chest. He held her, his own heart breaking, and realized that Dakota was right about one thing. He didn't fully understand Ayana's struggle. Couldn't understand what it meant to lose your entire culture, your entire people, and then have to choose between reclaiming it and staying with someone you loved. What are you going to do? He finally asked. I do not know, Ayana whispered. I need time. I need to think. I need to decide who I am and who I want to be. Over the next 2 days, Dakota returned. He brought other Apache from his group. They sat around Thomas's house, speaking their language, sharing stories, practicing traditions. Thomas watched Ayana transform among them. She laughed differently, moved differently, spoke with an animation he'd never seen. She belonged with them in a way she'd never. 3 days felt like 3 years. Thomas moved through the ranch like a ghost, doing what needed to be done but feeling nothing. The house echoed with Ayana's absence. Her herbs still hung drying in the kitchen. Her beadwork lay unfinished on the table. Her scent lingered in the blankets by the fire. He hadn't touched any of it. Couldn't bear to. On the morning of the 4th day, Thomas was in the garden, the one Ayana had started, when he heard a horse approaching. His heart leaped, but he forced himself to stay calm. It was probably the sheriff checking on him again, or a neighbor come to offer useless sympathy. But when he looked up, his breath caught. Ayana sat on the horse alone, her face streaked with tears and dust from hard riding. Thomas dropped the tools he'd been holding and just stood there, afraid to move, afraid this was a dream that would dissolve if he reached for it. Ayana dismounted slowly, her legs shaky. They stood 20 feet apart, staring at each other. You came back, Thomas said, his voice cracking. I came back, Ayanna confirmed. Why? What happened? Did something go wrong? No, everything went right. That is the problem. Ayanna moved closer, closing the distance between them. Tomas, they were wonderful. The people, the community, the traditions, everything I had lost, everything I remembered and missed, it was there. We sang the old songs, told the old stories, spoke our language. It was like coming home after being lost for so long. Thomas felt his heart sink. Then why are you here? Because I realized something, Ayanna said, tears running down her face. Home is not just where you are from. Home is not just the place where people share your blood and your history. Home is where you are loved, where you are chosen, where you choose to be. I don't understand, Thomas said, afraid to hope. Those 3 days I was surrounded by my people, by Apache traditions and language and culture, and it fed my soul in ways I desperately needed. I remembered who I was, where I came from, the strength of my ancestors. Ayanna took his hands. But every night I lay in my blanket and I thought of you. Every morning I woke and my first thought was you. Every story I heard I wanted to tell you. Every moment of joy I wished you were there to share it. Ayanna, let me finish, she said urgently. I realize that I can honor my heritage and still choose my future. I can be Apache and still be your wife. I can remember where I came from and still know where I belong. And Tomas, I belong with you, not because I have no other choice, not because I am afraid, but because I love you, because you are my home now. Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he was afraid he might hurt her, but she held him just as tightly, both of them crying, both of them shaking with relief. I thought I'd lost you, Thomas said into her hair. I thought you'd found your place with them and I'd never see you again. You cannot lose me, Ayanna said fiercely. I am yours and you are mine. Not because of papers or laws or obligation, because we choose each other. Every day we choose each other. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the garden they'd planted together. Finally, Thomas pulled back just enough to see her face. What did Dakota say? When you told him you were leaving? He was angry at first, Ayanna admitted. He said I was choosing white world over Apache world. Choosing comfort over heritage. But then the elder woman, she is very wise, she took me aside. She said something I will never forget. What did she say? She said that being Apache is not about where you live or who you love. It is about what you carry in your heart, about the stories you remember and the traditions you honor, about the strength you show and the dignity you maintain. She said I can be fully Apache even if I live in white man's world. As long as I never forget who I am, I will always be Apache. Thomas touched her face gently. I never want you to forget. I want to help you remember. I want to learn everything about your culture, your language, your people. I want our children, if we have them, to know both worlds, to be proud of both heritages. Children, Ayanna repeated, smiling through her tears. You think about children? I think about everything with you, Thomas said honestly. I think about growing old together, about the life we'll build, about the family we'll create that honors both your past and our future. I want this too, Ayanna said. But Tomas, I need you to understand something. I will need to stay connected to Apache ways. We'll need to speak my language, practice my traditions. Sometimes I will need to visit Apache communities. I cannot let that part of me die just because I choose to live here with you. Then we make sure it doesn't die, Thomas said firmly. We'll travel to settlements whenever you need. We'll learn together. We'll make this ranch a place where both cultures are honored, where Apache and frontier traditions exist side by side. You would do this? Really? Ayanna, I would do anything for you. Haven't you figured that out yet? Thomas smiled. You've already transformed this ranch. The garden you planted mixes your traditional crops with mine. The horses you train respond to both Apache and English commands. You've shown me that two different worlds can exist together beautifully. Why can't we do the same with our lives? Ayanna kissed him then, deeply, passionately, all the fear and uncertainty of the past days pouring out. Thomas kissed her back, his hands tangling in her hair, holding her like he'd never let go again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ayanna rested her forehead against his. I am home, she said simply. Right here with you. This is home. Welcome home, Thomas replied. Welcome home, my wife. My partner. My love. They walked back to the house hand in hand. Inside, Thomas made coffee while Ayanna told him everything about her time with the Apache group. The stories, the songs, the traditions she'd remembered, the people she'd met. Dakota gave me something before I left, she said, pulling out a bundle wrapped in soft leather. Inside was beadwork, beautiful and intricate. He made this for me. Said even though I choose to leave, I am still Apache, still family. Said he hopes someday I will teach my children these patterns. That was generous of him, Thomas said. After everything, he is a good man. He wants what is best for me, even if he does not understand my choice. Ayanna set down the beadwork carefully. He also told me something else. Something important. What? He said loving you does not make me less Apache. Choosing this life does not erase my heritage. He said the strongest thing Apache people have always done is adapt. Survive. Find new ways to live while keeping the old ways in our hearts. Ayanna smiled. He said maybe I am doing the most Apache thing possible. Surviving in a new world while honoring the old one. Thomas felt a surge of gratitude for Dakota, despite everything. He sounds wise. He is. And he made me promise something. Promise that I will teach our children Apache language. That I will tell them the stories. That I will make sure they know where half of them comes from. I promise that too, Thomas said. I want our children to be proud of both sides of their heritage. To be bridges between two worlds the way you are. That evening they worked together in the garden, side by side. Ayanna showing Thomas the proper way to care for the Apache crops she'd planted. The sun set in brilliant colors over the New Mexico landscape, painting everything gold and orange and pink. Tomas, Ayanna said as they watched the sunset, do you remember the first morning? When you found me on your porch. I remember everything about that morning. I was so scared, so angry, so hopeless. I thought my life was over. Thought I would either be slave or would die trying to escape. Ayanna turned to look at him. I never imagined this. Never dreamed I could be happy again. Could love again. Could have a home again. I never imagined it either, Thomas admitted. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, just existing, not really living. Then you showed up and changed everything. We changed each other, Ayanna corrected. You taught me that not all white men are cruel. That kindness exists even in a harsh world. That love can grow in the strangest places. And you taught me that walls around your heart don't protect you. They just make you lonely. That different doesn't mean wrong. That the best things in life are the ones you never expected. They stood together as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, the same stars that had watched over Ayanna's ancestors, the same stars that would watch over their children and grandchildren. This ranch, Ayanna said thoughtfully, we should give it Apache name. Something that honors both our worlds, and what would you suggest? Ayanna thought for a moment. How about place where two rivers meet? In Apache, Gujibi, because that is what we are. Two rivers from different sources, meeting and flowing together into something new. Gujibi, Thomas repeated, his pronunciation terrible but earnest. I love it. This is Gujibi Ranch, where two worlds meet and become one. Over the following months, they made good on their promises. Thomas learned Apache phrases, though his accent made Ayanna laugh. They traveled to the nearest Apache settlement once a month. Ayanna teaching and learning, staying connected to her people. At home, they created new traditions that blended both cultures. In the garden, Apache crops grew beside frontier vegetables. In the house, Apache baskets sat on shelves next to Thomas's books. The songs Ayanna sang while working were half Apache lullabies, half frontier ballads. They were creating something entirely new, while honoring everything that came before.